Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the David Watson podcast. Today, I spoke with Carl. Carl is an author, an electrical engineer, a man who has been to many places. But he has right now just released the second book of a trilogy. And in this episode, I got to talk to him about that. I hope you enjoy it. As always, please like, subscribe, tell your friends and family. Podcast is the gift that keeps on giving. Hello. Nice to meet you, Carl, and thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing very fine. Thank you very much, David.
And just to give some people some reference, we just had a quick discussion about the weather. Carl is in Florida and I'm in the UK.
Uh,
Go.
yeah, right now it's not too windy. It's not too cold. The hurricanes are pretty well all gone, and so that's we can go out. And not, I don't have too much hair left to blow on a windy day, but
It's true. It's true. I've never been, not that I would ever want to be, but how bad are the hurricanes? You know, as if you're actually there, how bad are they?
um, well, they can be very bad. Fortunately, we've escaped. The ones this year was headed towards us, but then it took a right-hand turn and went to the East Coast. We're on the West Coast of Florida, on the Gulf, and it turned east, and it can tear down houses. And if you live in a trailer, there's a lot of trailer camps here in Florida. Best was to get out and go somewhere where the hurricane's not headed. We live in a condo on the fourth floor, so if there's flooding, it won't get to us.
Yeah.
Hurricanes, they really, you know, um, they don't get excuse me, and they don't get here too often. Let's see. The first hurricane I witnessed or I was part of was in New York.
All right. I didn't know they got them.
Yeah, I was about 18 or 16 to 18. And I was working for my stepfather who had a resort place out on Long Island. And when the hurricane passed, I had to rake all the leaves. So I never had much respect for hurricanes.
No, no, no. Um, Tell us about your new book.
The new book, is number 2 in a trilogy. It's Friendship City, Hanging by a Thread.
Uh-huh.
And it's available pretty well everywhere. Amazon, iBooks, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, etc. And I would say it's a thriller, political thriller in suspense. And doing reasonably well. Excuse me. The pollen here is getting rather high. The first one in the book, this one, Sundown, it was published and released in 2017.
Yeah.
And that's set, and so the trilogy is going to have 2 main protagonist characters: female president Lenora Allison and an NYPD detective, Nick Garvey. And they're combating the world. Takes place, the first book, in 2017, and the world is controlled basically by the World Council, as it turns out, a rather murderous World Council headed by Jason Beck.
Uh-huh.
And they control all the world's petroleum. And if a country wants a little bit of energy, then they have to bow down and do exactly what Jason Beck wants to get any energy. And he's been controlling the world since about 25, 30 years. And put each country in strict control or chains, if you want to call it, and the population has decreased. There hasn't been as much food or what have you, and the World Council, his aim is to control all law and order. So there's very few police left. New York City, maybe there's 30%, and the uh, the city itself has been split into about 15 different neighborhoods for their own, they figure they can protect themselves easier than the police can. And so the president and Nick, they combined to try and bring down the World Council. And he also has a daughter, Sandra, that's been he's around 60. She's in her late 30s, but she was beat up by her boyfriend, is in a coma. So he's split between helping the president and trying to keep her safe. And in the end of the first book, Jason Beck has been, from his point of view, unfortunately shot by his own people and in a car that explodes. So he's severely injured. The president puts him in a sanatorium, make sure he's guarded. The second book that came out in August 2021, Friendship City, Hanging by a Thread, the World Council hasn't been completely eliminated. It's a henchman of Jason Beck has taken control, and he and the council introduce a man-made plague into the United States, both the East Coast and the West Coast. And they comes with they had a couple of little jars or antidotes, and after about several 100,000 people died, they contacted, the World Council contacted the president, told them how to apply this antidote, which they did, and the patient survived. But they told them that there's another plague, and it's more dangerous, and there's no antidote. So that's what the second book is done. Friendship City, by the way, is a combination of Brownsville, Texas, and Matamoros, Mexico, right across. And they were continually shot at, the citizens and what have you, by the World Council. So they petitioned the two countries, United States and Mexico, to let them be a self-centered and self-controlling entity, which they were. So they call themselves Friendship City. And that was where one of the killer plagues was suspected to be ready to be exposed. So the Nick Garvey, the president, and the people working with him do their best to find out. They finally locate understand that there's 7 tubs of this killer plague, and they have to get it. So the Friendship City deals in the last part of it trying to find these tubs. and the replacement to Jason Beck. They finally corner him, and he's gotten rid of, but the Tubbs remain, and they they've established controls outside of Friendship City all around there, and they find out that there's tunnels underneath, and people are coming in. Couple of fellows coming in
Hmm.
to release the plague,
Yeah.
and so this I outlined all these the first two books in reasonable detail back in maybe 2010, 2012. And it sort of surprised me as time went on because right now we don't have all the oil we used to have.
Yeah.
And the man-made plague in Friendship City, which was published in 2021, that was again started, planned out in 2010, 2012. I guess there was a pandemic. I got to stay inside so I keep away from the pollen.
Yeah.
but uh, but that was that sort of stunned me a little bit. And was I projecting the future or what?
Because there
But
is, yeah. Because and then there's the like you say, it must have felt a bit strange as well when you've planned out a kind of pandemic where they shut down the entire world globally, get together to do it, and you're already writing about this. You must kind of feel a mixture of sort of maybe fear and deja vu.
yeah, well, I knew I wanted to write a thriller, good versus evil, what have you, and I was projecting, what could be, there's a combination of the World Council. They control just about everything to start with in 2057, and the second book, Friendship City, 2058. But the rest of the citizens, they don't have too much of anything left. Maybe food, but that's about it. Uh, but I figured that was, it's the two books are called Derailing. The subtitle on the bottom is Derailing Dystopia, Book
Yeah.
One, Book Two. I'm currently working on Book Three, which would be the completion of the trilogy, and I guess uh, I'm pretty well finished the first draft of chapter five. So, but I've outlined it. My
What is the
concern.
what
Hmm?
is what is the writing process for you? Because you said the first books were outlined in 2010.
Well, I started out in 2010 having a heavier science fiction thing, and threw in maybe a little romance, what have you, and there were just too many things going on, so I focused on the thriller and suspense aspect of it, and I left it in the future, so. I can't really call it science fiction because there hasn't been too much advances in science in
Yeah.
this story. And it took me a while. I was, doing it myself. I didn't have, I've been interested in writing since I was, I guess about 8 years old. I read a couple of books and fascinated me. The Hunchback of Notre Dame
Yeah.
was the first, and then Isaac Asimov, and then let's see. When I was 8 years old, I got a typewriter, and hey, I can do stuff now. So at 8 years old, I wrote a little short story. I should have saved it. I know what it was about. A family is meeting the little boy, which was in my
Yeah.
viewpoint, was in the kitchen, and a gunman comes in, and he's okay. You people, he's going to hold them hostage and rob them or whatever. And the little boy notices this. So his plan is he goes to get some popcorn and the kernels, puts them in a pot, little oil, heats it up, and all of a sudden it goes pop, 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 pop. And the gunman said, "What?" And he races out. So that was my story.
That's good.
Yeah,
It's nice as well because you can see a child believing in that, and they're always the best stories when you can see
yeah,
the belief.
yeah. And so it continued. I was always been interested, but uh, I went to engineering school up in New Jersey, Stevens Tech, and then I worked at IBM for 35 years when they were making computers and semiconductors, not like they are now. And during the time I had, I met my wife at Stevens. We got married, had two kids. So there was diapers to change and stuff like that. So I didn't have time to write. And I got very involved in my work, engineering, programming, and a first line manager. And I retired in 1997, and after 35 years. And slowly we figured now is the time to see the world. That's when we saw Stonehenge
Yeah.
somewhere in that. And, but around 2010, I said, no, it's time for me to get back. I had done a couple short stories, not published. So I outlined the three books, and the first two in pretty good detail. And when I finished the first one, I said, okay, now I got to see if I can get it published. And so I sent out 60 some letters to publishing houses, agents, and what have you. And there was a lot of thumbs up, but it's not our type.
Yeah.
And suddenly, I don't know if I just stumbled on it. Covenant Books sent me they're interested, we'd be interested in reading your material, and if it satisfies our goals or restrictions, we'd like to publish it. And so the restrictions were that there can't be gratuitous violence, there can't be explicit sex, and there can't be anti-Christian values.
That's nice.
And so I said, well, there is violence, but it's not gratuitous. It's story driven and it's not bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, and I said, there's no explicit sex. I said, there's not even non-explicit sex. It's a thriller and storyline. I said, as far as Christian values, it's not anti-Christian. I told her, the lady that had contacted me, I had two nuns in the story.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell her that I had them killed, both nuns killed about
That was a surprise for her to read later.
But they read the book, agreed, published it, and during the time in the process, I had a critiquer editor in New Mexico. Has done William Greenleaf has done to me an outstanding job. I never majored in English. I majored in engineering and programming, but I like to tell a story. So he was very helpful and get rid of some of these commas, and I learned not to use adverbs and things like this.
Yeah, it's a complicated process.
Oh yeah, so it went on that way. The third book in the process, again, makes me wonder if I'm forecasting, because one of the keys. I didn't go into too much detail, but I said there's going to be financial disarray and failures throughout the world. And then the president is, and this Nick Darby, trying to prevent the financial ruin.
Yeah.
And I look around now and say, but
Yeah,
so
it's a
it's been,
difficult time, isn't it?
yeah. So it's been enjoyable writing it, uh,
So, what are your
and
thoughts?
especially,
Sorry, go
pardon?
on. Sorry, carry on. I interrupted you. My apologies.
Hmm. Uh, I have hearing aids, so they're not the,
Oh, sorry. I said, unfortunately, I interrupted you. So carry on, please.
yeah. Well, I now I can write full time. There's no diapers to change.
Yeah, yeah. And no
Yeah.
job. So, your time is can be well spent.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've enjoyed it and uh, plan to continue.
Well, just completely going off in a different direction. You did 35 years at IBM. That must have been
Yeah,
an incredible time to be at IBM because they were at the forefront of the hardware side of things.
yeah. It was Stevens when I graduated in 1962 was one of the first engineering schools that was had courses on transistors. All the others were vacuum tubes. And so when I interviewed, I was a C plus student. Uh,
Yeah,
and when I interviewed at IBM, they got up and drew on the blackboard transistors. But I was used to PNP and they draw NPN. I knew at least it was whatever what PNP was, these are the opposite. So when they asked me questions, I'm drawing my own thing, finger
yeah,
on a piece of paper. And I guess I gave the answers correctly. And even though I was a C plus student, I was one of the few, I guess, that understood transistors. So I got hired and worked as an engineering, maybe until, let's see, from 62 to maybe 68, 69. Then I drifted into programming and hey, that was fun. I
yeah.
enjoyed that too. And then maybe in maybe the mid 80s, I became a manager of actually I had the most, I had 18 people at one time in my department. And I figured my job was to help them become more valuable to themselves and to the
Yeah,
company. And other than that, stay out of the way. They did pretty well.
that's good.
I enjoyed the time.
Because well, the programming in the 80s, it was brand new. People don't, when you talk to somebody today about how we are in 2023, but the forefront was the 70s, the 80s, and then by the time
Right.
we got to the 90s, it kind of became its own thing. But
Oh
people
yeah,
were at the beginning, working out what programming was.
yeah, yeah. We at IBM, the area, the third level area I was in, it was a third line manager, second line, and then the first line managers, of which I eventually became one. We were in a group that supported the testers. All the semiconductors had to be tested, so we built the testers. So when I started in engineering, I was doing that, and
Yeah,
then they had to be programmed. So not too many people understood programming. I drifted into it uh, and got three or four people, and I enjoyed it. Started with Fortran, which was easy, and then I drifted into assembly language. I forget what they call it now, but it was it was uh, I learned the binary, hex and 1, 2, 4, 8,
Yeah.
that them all together, you got from 0 to 15, and the hex system. And I enjoyed it. And, just I just felt rewarded having that opportunity for 35 years. But, it's time to get back to writing since there was no diapers, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. But it's interesting though, because at that time, without realizing, you were part of something making history.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Well, nowadays they've gotten out of that. I mean, IBM used to be one of the uh, central manufacturers of semiconductors, transistors. When I started there in '62, there was transistors, and then they put them on a platform, hardware thing. But then there's uh, semiconductors mixed, uh, and then you had 10 transistors, 100 transistors on a little. It got to be, now there's millions, but
Yeah.
uh, IBM drifted away from that in the late, oh, definitely the mid to 90s.
Mm.
Uh, Nowadays, it's all in Asia, China
Yeah.
or Taiwan, and if they don't like us, the iPhone
Oh,
doesn't get
crikey. Yeah.
made.
So, how much of your book or books, the trilogy, do you think is maybe either a prediction or a fear of where we may be going?
I was just letting my mind spin along. What could happen, and as the world changed a bit, I said, "Gee, I didn't expect." Um, well, like in Friendship City, one of the things later in the book when they're trying to keep the World Council out and prevent them from introducing the plague in Friendship City. Uh, they find underground tunnels. Well, that's in the news today.
Yeah.
and uh, and it just, to me, it was just a fictional device to get people in there and try and disrupt uh, the Friendship City. And uh, the plague, I was looking back in 2010, 2012, to come up with some device that would get everybody's attention.
Yeah.
And I guess it did. It wasn't, at least it wasn't intentionally man-made, we hope.
Yeah. We hope. We hope. So, where do you see kind of America in the future?
I think I'm probably the old school, but I'm definitely not Gen Z.
No.
Uh, uh, but I think the world is made of, if you do certain things, you're going to get certain results, and that's not going to change. And I think basically, if you do what we've done before, individual responsibility. I'm a believer in that. We need a government, we need police and things like that, but we have to raise our children, what have you, and what we encourage them to believe and what have you, or teach them, is going to uh, impact our future. And right now, we're going through a strenuous period where a lot of the students don't know what to believe, or they want to believe something totally different than their parents or police or what have you. I think eventually, uh, if you, if you look at some of these cities that say, hey, defund the police, guess what you got? You got-
Yeah, you got a lot of
uh,
violence.
hmm?
They
Yeah,
got a lot of violence,
yeah.
and it's interesting because do you mind me asking where were your parents from?
Where, my parents, let's see, they actually, my mother was born in Canada, and I guess they were somewhat Canadian. My grandfather was involved with a medium-sized oil company in Titusville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Uh, but before that, I guess my background is Irish, English, and Welsh. And I don't know if they ever got along.
Yeah, we get on all right. I'm
But
half English, half Irish, so we get on fine.
oh, but and I checked. I said my mother's maiden name was Dylan. So I
Okay.
said, well, I'm going to check on it, and I put it in, and I found out Irish, yes, but one of the Normans that invaded it was called Dylan.
All right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and when I at Stevens, I met my future wife, and as her brother once said, "I'm the first non-Italian in the family."
Yeah.
They were
That'd be a
either
big
Italy,
deal as well.
no, either Italy or Sicily. Uh, Both her mother and her father were, I believe, born in this country, but the others were born in either Italy or Sicily. And but and I like pasta anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It worked out well. The reason I asked the question is, if it were possible, could you imagine trying to explain to your parents what the world is today? How would you explain it to them?
I would maybe look at some of the notes I wrote down in 2012, but the I don't want to get too political
No, no,
because,
no. It's
but
it's how I like to. Let's just like your wife is from Italian background, okay,
yes,
and you have a Canadian, English, Irish, Welsh background, okay,
yeah,
and it was an incredibly simpler time, but actually a much more difficult time to live.
yeah,
If you're an Italian immigrant coming into the state of New York, when your wife's parents and all of that would have come through, and the generations before them, it was not an easy time to be alive, but it was
no,
a simpler time. And
yes,
one of my
not as complex.
yeah, and one of my measures of how crazy are we, or how crazy has the world become, is how would I explain today to my grandparents?
Let's see. My I think I met my grandfather once,
Yeah.
twice, and so I didn't have a deep relationship with him. Uh, I had a better relationship with my wife's parents, and I met three of her grandparents. Her paternal
Hmm.
grandfather had passed away before I came on the scene, and but they were a very close-knit family. Mine was they were all within I'd say cousins and aunts and uncles and what have you lived within maybe uh, 10, 15 miles of each other in New York, Long Island, basically. And my parents, uh, my mother's family was dispersed throughout the whole United States. Uh, I was born in California,
Okay.
and in 1938. I have to correct some people. They say, "You sure it wasn't 1838?"
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
said, "I'm sure." But my parents got divorced when I was two,
Wow.
and it was a friendship. It was a amicable split. But my mother and I and uh, an older lady that was, I guess, a nanny for her father and her family, what have you, came with us. We moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I was overjoyed to see snow. But I think I look back on it. My mother was very caring. But she had a job. She worked as an executive secretary at a company. Nobody recognizes it today, probably, but Nash Motors.
Yep, I know
And
Nash. I know of Nash Motors.
oh, okay. And but when I and this nanny, she was basically like replacement for my father. She kept me out of trouble. But both my mother and she advised me what the world is, and you got to
Hmm.
take care of yourself. And so when I met my wife at a party at Stevens Tech, and gee, I like this lady, and I met her parents. In fact, she went when she graduated. She went on a trip to Europe for 2 months or so, and her parents had invited me to stay and spend a weekend with them, which I did. And I wanted to see what the family was like, and it
Yeah.
was great. So I wrote my girlfriend at that time, said I spent the weekend with your parents at their place. And she told me later, says, why would he do that? Why? But anyway, I saw what a family, we've been married 60 years, actually 60 and a half years. And
Congratulations.
yeah, and enjoyed, I'm sure, when I go to a supermarket, drugstore or something, and the person behind the counter says, "Can I help you?" And not every time, but frequently I'll say, "Well, my wife says I'm beyond help."
Yeah.
And, but, we've had 60 years, we still love each other, and we're in reasonably good health. And except when the pollen comes around.
Yeah. No. It is, isn't it? Because it's an incredible change that America has seen.
Yeah, it's again, I don't want to sound too political, but I think a lot of the education is dealing less on mathematics and science and speaking your native language and what have you, and more on who should we point a finger at? And the question is, which finger are we pointing? Uh, and there's a lot of, it seems a lot of the education is trying to hide things from the parents.
Yeah.
And once that's done, uh, I figure, anybody that does that should be fired. That's
No, I agree. I agree. I think I think one of the things that, which is one of the reasons I enjoy the conversation about the way that life was, because it was a more difficult life, but it was a lot simpler. It was a lot simpler to understand. But one of the things that came that I see that's a significant change is accountability. You know,
yeah,
when I was growing up, and I'd imagine when you married into that Italian family, you were told under no circumstance what was expected and the standards that were
yes.
expected.
Yeah. Nowadays, basically, well, how many in New York? I guess there's a lot of no bail I don't know if the bail system is existence anymore. You committed a crime, we'll prosecute you, but until then, um, if we don't hold you in prison, you can get out no bail.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of eh, they'll do better later. No, yeah, if no one's guiding them and no one's uh, showing them that if you do something wrong, you pay a penalty. Uh, you know, uh, that I think uh, that's part of the problem. You don't get educated on what is the right thing to do to get move forward in life. Uh, and I think a lot of the educational, are hiding from the parents, and the parents have gotten used to that. And a lot of them,
Hmm. I think a lot of parents have stepped away from the responsibility of raising their own children.
Arden, oh,
I said, I think a lot of parents have stepped away from the responsibility of raising their own children.
that's the house phone.
Ah.
It'll stop ringing.
Yeah, I was saying that I think a lot of parents have stepped away from the responsibility of raising their own children.
Yeah, it's uh, my mother wanted to make sure, and this nanny wanted to make sure, and my wife's parents wanted to make sure that you understand what life is and you do the right things, you care for people, and and whatever you do, uh, either good or bad, has results and effects. And it seems a lot of parents now, maybe the ones that uh, grew in the 60s, 70s and 80s and 90s, for some reason they were shielded from cause and effect. And so they don't educate their children, I think, that on how to progress through life. Just enjoy yourself.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I enjoy myself, but I, you know, I enjoy working and succeeding, and I don't think that people that bust into a supermarket and steal off the shelves maybe they figure they're succeeding, but I don't
yeah.
know.
It's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. So, I mean, how do you? I mean, your book is almost becoming a reflection of a direction we're going in, and it's how do the how would the characters in the book, in terms of without giving away the endings, but how are they trying to go about from stopping it happening?
Uh, well, they're working together to um, in the detective Nick Garvey has his daughter. Uh, he his wife died earlier, and his daughter got beat by her boyfriend, uh, and someone else got rid of him. So it didn't fall on Nick to do that, but he's got that to deal with. He She has a daughter, and he's taking care of her. And uh, when in the first book there was the 15 neighborhoods, he joined with one neighborhood to fight off the World Council, and one of the fellows that he worked with there in the neighborhood was killed, and his son adopted him rather than the other way, because so there's that. They started off in the first book, Nick Garvey and his partner uh, trailing a suspected kidnapper, which it turned out he was. And but they brought him in, and his grandmother, the kidnapper's grandmother, said, she said, you can't do this. This is, and uh, she laid down the law, and he listened, and eventually became a positive force in the story. Uh, and to me, that was I wasn't thinking of it at the time, but I don't think there's people that do that anymore. And if they are, they're probably the grandparents
Yeah.
who lived through, my mother, say, hey, there's certain ways you do things, and you remember if you don't do it right or you thumb your nose, uh, someone's going to bite your nose off. Uh, but parents now seem. Uh, I think what you're leading to is parents don't seem to uh, care that much about uh, giving rules and regulations. They care for their kids, but part of it is helping them grow.
Because
They,
because like I said, when you're you know you're born in 1938, at the age of 2, your parents get divorced, and you move to Milwaukee in Wisconsin. And
Mhm.
there's a thing about, like I say, those eras, um, if you weren't, if your parents didn't raise you safely under a roof with food on your table, life was going to raise you anyway, and it wasn't going to be a pleasant way of doing it. It was tough, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Whereas now we don't seem to have found a way that. Actually, I'm going to go in a different direction with this. If you talk to youngsters today, they think they live in the worst time in history. And it's just like,
yeah.
there isn't this is the best time in history that's ever existed,
Hmm.
in terms of our potential, and what we have laid down before us.
Hmm. Yeah.
But you talk to them and they think this is the worst time in history to be alive.
Yeah.
And
And believe me, I don't know really why, but you know, in addition to my mother and this nanny that was showing what life meant, I went to a Catholic school, and my teachers were all nuns.
yeah,
And
I went to a Catholic school with some nuns as well.
yeah, and they would tell you what was, to be done. And uh, so when I went to engineering school in New Jersey, I had to study. I know
Yeah,
if I'm going to graduate, I had to put in the effort. Nowadays, uh, I liked mathematics, and I enjoyed reading. It seems that those seem to be two of the disciplines that students are doing much poorly on,
yeah,
math and English, at least in this country. We used to be pretty well near the top. Now we're down maybe 15 positions or something like that. And that's not just well, it's the parents. I mean, I went to the nuns say, hey, if you don't know what 2 + 2 is, you got to go back and do more work.
yeah.
And nowadays, is math really that important? I don't know.
It's
To
just,
some people, it is.
so we're talking about the modern world, but we'll pretend that we're reflecting on it through the book. If they don't succeed, what's going to happen?
If who doesn't succeed,
If the protagonists in your book, if they don't succeed, what's going to happen?
if they don't succeed, the World Council will take over everything and uh, wield an iron fist. And if you disagree with what they're doing, that iron fist is going to be right in your throat. And if that still doesn't deter you, then the throat will be severed. Uh, you can look around. Again, people will disagree with me, but you can look around uh, the world. There are groups like Uyghurs. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right correctly, but they're sent to northern China somewhere
Mm.
because they're not respected. They're not wanted in China. Um, and we've had some things like that. Hopefully, in our past, we um, some corrected that, at least and governmentally. But there's still people that I don't agree with the philosophy that said there are oppressors and there are the oppressed, and uh, there are individually some people that like to oppress people, but as far as a racial class or something like that, that's just trying to stir up trouble. And people, the young people that get caught up, I wonder 15, 20 years from now what their life is going to be like. Are they going to have kids? What are they going to teach them? And to me, that's the important part. What do you teach your children? And and it's basically the parents' responsibility to make sure their children learn and progress through life. It's not the teachers. The teachers are supposed to teach math, history,
Yeah,
English, and they don't as much as they used to. But
it's yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's because sooner or later they themselves are going to get hit with life's problems,
yeah,
you know, and they're going to end up with children, and those children are going to have problems that they
yeah,
don't know how to deal with, and nor do their parents. And
yeah,
that that's not a good way to be figuring out how to move forward.
yeah. To me, that's why when like I say 2010, uh, by then it was, I guess, parents were becoming somewhat lackadaisical in education. And to me, that was one of the things, and the government interfered maybe too much in that. In Friendship City, there's an appendix. One of the Brownsville, Texas, and Matamoros, Mexico, both sides of the Rio Grande River. Again, I don't know why I picked that, but that seems to be a spot right now of interest. But uh, when they formed Friendship City, they came up with their own Bill of Rights,
Yeah,
and the Bill of Rights, to some degree, had obligations, Bill of Rights with obligations. Mainly, the obligations applied to um, politicians, government, and in some cases, families, how they control, And I came up with 10 that's in the appendix of Friendship City, Bill of Rights covering education, immigration, uh, government control and what have you. And then I solicited, got 18, I think, yeah, 18 more Bill of Rights submitted from various people, some friends and other people I got through the emails and internet. So that are forming, the basis, and the citizens are the ones that will uh, propose the laws. The citizens are those that, work the politicians. Uh, they can take what's proposed and do the mechanics of bringing it up, but it doesn't become, no law becomes a law unless it's voted upon by the citizens. I don't know, I forget what I said now, three quarters or something of the
yeah.
citizens. And that, that doesn't exist in our country right now, in this country. The laws, you know, there's a rough law passed, and bureaucrats can make their own. They can modify laws and introduce new ones. And that's outlawed in Friendship City's Bill of Rights. No bureaucrat can make anything resembling a law. And if he does, he's fired. Uh,
That should be how
and
it is.
yeah.
It just should be how it is. It just should be. Um, just before we finish up, I just want to ask you one last question, which is it's a very random question. I just like to ask it. Um, Using the best of your imagination, if you could be at any place, any time, anywhere in history, where would you go? What car would you drive, and what music would you listen to?
What you say? What car would I drive?
Yeah, what car would you drive, and what music would you listen to?
Oh, I'm a big fan of jazz. Uh, I, when I was 18, my mother let me drive to Newport, Rhode Island, to see the Newport Jazz Festival, #3, which is considered the greatest in history as far as jazz festivals. Saw Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Woody Herman, uh, and, uh, you know, several of the, uh, jazz stars, singers, and what have you. Uh, and I had asked the newspaper in Long Island if they could, you know, I'm going to, if I take some pictures, and they said, okay, we'll give you a press pass. And I was able to get backstage too. But that was, I still like jazz. I mean, I listen to other music too. And but uh, my records, most of which I've given to my son now, be they 78 RPMs or what have you, primarily are jazz. I've saved a few CDs. Cars. Um, when I graduated Stevens in 1962, tuition for 1 year was $2,200. And got a Chevy Impala
Nice.
at grad for roughly its price was 2,200, 2,300. And nowadays, I was 62. Nowadays, Stevens went from 2,200 a year to at least 60,000 by,
Yeah,
65,000 at least. A Chevy Impala, which I guess came back, maybe they're very high 20s or 32, something like that thousand. So
mm,
colleges have gone, hey, we can make money,
yeah,
but they're not teaching as well. And I don't know how my daughter, she went to Stevens Tech also in 1982, and met a fellow there. So she married him, and they've been married since 1960, 63, 60, yeah, I'm sorry, 1987.
87. Yeah,
I'm getting my graduation mixed up with hers, and they have uh, two grandchildren, and one is a doctor. She wants to be an ER doctor. One time she said, "So I don't have to call people back." That's good,
yeah,
but she was an ER doctor in Newark, New Jersey, which she'll learn a lot about gunshot wounds there. Or her older brother, he's a teacher in social history and what have you, and I guess teaches seventh and eighth graders. But they're both productive and they enjoy what they're doing. That's the key thing.
it is.
And um, but so the car Chevy, And I watch Magnum PI every so often, and the red Ferrari or something looks
Yeah,
impressive, but I'm not going to drive it.
no, but
And
I did. I remember Magnum as a child. Magnum was one of the last great programs.
yeah, and um, yeah, that basically is
So we're going to go with the Chevy, the Jazz Festival, and you'll be listening to jazz.
yeah, and writing.
Yeah,
I enjoy,
that's
but
excellent. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
well, thank you, David. By the way, I worked for IBM for 35 years. Are you any relation to the Watsons there?
No, no, unfortunately, I'm not. Unfortunately, not. You know, but thank you very much for your time. It's appreciated.